Through the power of art, we are engaging in a type of transformative conversation regarding women, the pandemic, feminism, and equality, so that we may give a voice to hope for a more equitable future, to finally break free.
In early civilizations, women were leaders, influencers, goddesses, and participated fully in all spheres of society. In modern history, women experienced a significant loss of power. Women and girls were oppressed, excluded from education, denied freedoms, rights, identity, property ownership, and financial independence.
Women were relegated to the private sphere of the home with very little role to play in public affairs. They were responsible for housekeeping, child-rearing, and caregiving. They were targeted as possessions, victims of discrimination, harassment, molestation, or rape, subject of the male gaze. In art, they were used as models. In 1989, less than 5% of artists in the modern section of the Metropolitan Museum of Art were women, but 85% of the nudes were female.
Women were making gains incrementally through the years, albeit very slowly. The world was eagerly anticipating the year 2020 for even more breakthroughs for women's rights. Then the pandemic hit. Life was never the same again. In many ways, the pandemic was a gift. It gave us a major slap in the face, opened our eyes, and uncovered the long-standing cultural and structural root causes to what is happening with our economy and women. But the isolation was debilitating to the psyche of everyone, especially women.
The impact of isolation and confinement during the lockdown curtailed our freedoms even more. With socializations restricted and economic survival at risk, we sought introspection and contemplation of our situation and well-being.
The issue of feminism has been brought to the forefront to address not only the financial and emotional impact of the pandemic, but also the myriad issues women faced disproportionately with the lockdown. With all the responsibilities women had to take on during the pandemic, something had to give. And one of them was women's hard-earned economic progress. Many women had to leave the workforce. Have we entered a new era of gender inequality?
Women are paying a steep price. The initial wave of the pandemic sent the unemployment rate soaring, and more so for women as the economy started to recover in late 2021. Unemployment went down, but it continued at historically high levels, with 8 million women still unemployed and looking for work. Employment in the service industries, education and health services, which are dominated by women in the lower income strata, continue to be disproportionately affected. Women's employment is still substantially below the pre-COVID level. The slow recovery in child care services highlights the difficulties faced by many parents, especially women, in returning to the workforce as the economy reopens.
All the gains women had strived for to achieve equality in the workplace are at risk. The economic shutdown was not of their choosing, but they paid the price in loss of income and health care. Many women's slide into poverty is now a reality. They lost not only current and future income, but also retirement income.
Who are advocating for women? Who continues to put a gender lens on the response and recovery to COVID-19, ensuring that the unique needs of girls and women are addressed? Women are at the core of the fight against the COVID-19 crisis. The profound shock of the pandemic on the economic well-being of women has pushed feminism to the forefront.
What is feminism? It is the belief in full economic, social, and political equality for women. Why is the quest for gender equality and opportunity so elusive? What is the basis for this prejudice?
A modern feminist, François Paulin de la Barre, a French philosopher, born in 1648, was rediscovered and rescued from obscurity in the 20th century by feminist researchers and writers. Paulin followed in the footsteps of the first feminist philosopher, Christine de Pizan, in 15th century France, who challenged prevailing attitudes toward women with a bold call for female education. Paulin was way ahead of his time and even ours. He was only 24 in 1671 when he published the first of 3 treatises on the equality of the two sexes. His vision was universal equality for all, and his vision of equality begins with women and girls. His declaration, "The mind has no sex," was revolutionary. He believed that inequality is not natural, and neither is the male sex oppressive by nature. His philosophy is considered today as breathtaking in its audacity.
Paulin claimed that the foundations of prejudice against the abilities of women are based on self-interest and social customs.
Prejudices about the inferiority of women are difficult to overcome as they are shared by both men and women. Paulin calls this internalized prejudice.
The oppression of women by economic and political power will be eradicated only when women stop internalizing this inferior status.
All these prejudices are harder to eradicate as they are not based on reason. We see that in our society today.
The feminist icon of the 20th century, Simone de Beauvoir, quoted Paulin heavily in her book. Her most memorable quote from him was, "One is not born, but rather becomes woman." She gave voice and power to many women. Unfortunately, she denigrated motherhood and marriage as traps to the advancement of women in the workplace. The feminist movement seems to have espoused paid work and career as the primary badge of equality. Capitalism gives value only to activities that can be monetized.
In comparison, Paulin's claim is revolutionary, that motherhood and caregiving are worthy of respect. Women's nurturing work should be elevated, not debased. He argues we could do without princes, soldiers, and tradesmen, but we cannot do without women in our childhood. Motherhood should be given equal value as ruling and judging. Mothers are the first leaders, caretakers, and teachers. Society should ask the question, how do we support them?
With women compelled to take command of unpaid caregiving, they sacrificed career, financial security, and their well-being. The lockdown and the pandemic exacerbated this issue. It is more urgent and imperative that we address it today.
I found my voice in the classroom, in the boardroom, in every room I inhabit. My voice is power. Paulin's most important contribution is his demand that women and men have equal right to knowledge and opportunity.
How many girls and women remain in the mire today when they might have distinguished themselves if they were given encouragement? When do men and women stop trying to be the way people define them? Why should women be in a box and not be free to fly? Girls must not fear risk-taking, adventure, or leadership. The search for a just and equal society is possible only by getting completely rid of prejudice. To break free.
Even before the pandemic, women struggled with balancing career, family, childcare, elder care, and household chores. There seemed to be no time for self. Women had limited possibilities because of their commitments. Often, they had to choose between career or taking care of their families. The lack of affordable childcare hit hard. Then the COVID pandemic changed our world. The severity and danger of the pandemic became clear. Many of the support systems women relied on collapsed. Cassandra, from Greek mythology, was a clairvoyant whose warnings fell on deaf ears. There had been Cassandra warnings that laws were needed to support maternity leave, childcare, equal pay, elder care, and laws to curb sexual harassment of women. The devastating effects of the COVID crisis on women made these warnings more urgent. Women's income and careers suffered greatly and will not recover without substantial help. There are other areas in which women also need additional support. For many, many women, managing their daily commitments has been overwhelming. Their personal freedoms are gone. They feel trapped. Women have been and are targets of violence during war and during peacetime. Domestic violence has taken a sharp upturn during the pandemic. Addiction has become a major problem in our society. The imposed isolation during the pandemic created havoc with the support system for recovering sufferers. The rate of relapses and overdoses skyrocketed. The pandemic totally overburdened the already at capacity healthcare system. Many tests, treatments, even chemotherapy and surgeries had to be delayed. This added to the stress and unfavorable outcome for many patients. There used to be a law that required hospitals to plan for emergencies. This law should be revisited. Pregnancy in itself is hard on the mother's body, but without adequate maternity leave, her recovery is so much harder and longer. Will society become more supportive of mothers, or will women still have to hide to feed their children? Will there be increased support for children and affordable childcare? Will the balancing act become easier and stability achieved? Is it not finally time for women to climb out of the box? Equality of the sexes would be a long overdue adjustment in our society. With support to create a more equal playing field, women can break free and fulfill their potential.
To break free. This presentation is a collaboration of 4 American women who feel passionately that women are assuming the brunt of responsibility during this pandemic. Through the power of art, our mission is to inform, to understand, to advocate. The medium used by an artist encompasses an inner language. In this collaboration, we use fabric that shimmers, that moves freely, captures being in flight. The cocoons suggest both protection and isolation. But when you peer inside, there is beauty waiting to break free. We use clay to convey various opposing emotions, like joy and anger, tenderness and rejection. Clay in the hands of the artist creates a birth and a transformation. And so through fabric art and clay sculptures, accompanied by prose and music, we begin this transformative conversation. I am Leonie Castelino, a contemporary Bojagi fiber artist.
I am Esmeralda Lin, Professor Emerita of Finance, researcher, and writer.
I am Irene Osborn, a ceramic sculptor.
I am Bibiana Jabi Huang Matheis.
Recently named one of the world's 50 greatest leaders by Fortune magazine, Dr. C. Nicole Mason is the president and CEO of the Institute for Women's Policy Research. For the past 2 decades, Dr. Mason has spearheaded research on issues relating to gender and racial equity, policy formation, political participation among women, and communities of color. At the start of the pandemic, she coined the term "she-cession" to describe the disproportionate impact of the employment and income losses on women during this crisis.
My name is C. Nicole Mason, and I'm the president and CEO of the Institute for Women's Policy Research, a leading think tank in the U.S. committed to winning economic security for all women and building their power and influence in society. In January 2020, we were celebrating an important milestone. For the first time in more than a decade, women made up more than 50% of the U.S. workforce. The booming economy at the time that we were celebrating was made possible in part by women. Then something happened. A pandemic swept across the nation, all but wiping out those gains. In March 2020, the economy shed more than 40 million jobs, and women bore more than 70% of those losses. Nearly 4 in 10 women's jobs have been adversely impacted by the pandemic. In February 2020, the unemployment rate for women was about 4%. By March of that same year, it was a historic 14%. For Black and Latino women, the numbers were slightly higher, 16.7% and 18.9% respectively. For workers with less than a high school education, the unemployment rate was 20%. And while the unemployment rate has fallen dramatically, we still have a long way to go for a full recovery for all women. It's been a long road and nearly 2 years since we made that milestone announcement about the progress of women in the workforce. And much has changed, and we've learned so much. The pandemic has forced us all in our private and professional lives to rethink work. For women, it brought to life the many conversations that we're having in public and private about our work-life balance and childcare. For the first time, women in the C-suite and women working in grocery stores across the country understood that being unable to do it all was less about our will and capacity to find more time in a day or to be better organized, but we were working in a system that was failing us, and it wasn't our fault. Now here we are with the opportunity to reimagine work, with an opportunity to create workplaces that work for most, if not all, workers. We can pass policies like paid sick and family medical leave. We can make childcare more affordable for families. Right now, families spend more than 30% of their income on care. We can pass laws that promote pay transparency and increase wages for all workers. We have an opportunity to dream big, make a new world. We're all on the front lines and have the power to make significant change. My hope is that we all see this moment as a once-in-a-generation opportunity to get it right, to create workplaces that are reflective of our values and where all people feel like they're compensated fairly and competitively, are treated with dignity and respect, where their skills and talents are put to use. It's really up to us to seize this moment.
Special thanks to our guest speaker, Dr. C. Nicole Mason. To know more about growing up in America and surviving against all odds, read her inspiring memoir, Born Bright. To know more about what she and her organization do to advance the status of women, visit their website, iwpr.org. Dr. Mason, you give us hope. There is a future.
We are proud to be art women at work.